Hello and welcome back to Everard Junction. Over the past week I have started a job that I've been putting off for a long time. That job was to go back through my collection of locomotives and re-weather and repaint any that I was not happy with. I also had a couple of newer arrivals to the layout that had not yet been weathered. If you've been following the channel for any length of time, you've probably noticed that I'm quite keen on having weathered rolling stock and locomotives. A lot of my locomotives I weathered probably somewhere around 6 or 7 years ago. At least half of my fleet have been weathered a long time ago. I look at those previous weathering attempts and I'm dissatisfied and I want to do better. So I'll very quickly show you the locomotives that I've completed and then we'll get straight into the business end of doing the work. 47715 Haymarket, removed my previous weathering attempt, had another crack at it. I think it looks a lot better. 37046, a new addition to the layout in January, weathered and paid particular attention to streaking the dirt down the side of the body like the rain would in real life. 47576 Kings Lynn, original weathering removed, fresh weathering applied, and I also removed the overdone weathering on the lower portion of the loco just under the cab where that bit of yellow shows. Looks a lot cleaner and fresher. 47612 Titan was previously very over-weathered and overdone. You could barely see the yellow domes on the cabs. Removed the weathering, reapplied using pictures as reference. 56049, this model comes from Hornby with the red stripe painted in an incorrect shade of red. I repainted that quite a few years ago, but unfortunately the varnish yellowed over the years and the model looked absolutely terrible. You've not seen it for a very long time. This has been stripped back to a plastic body shell and completely repainted. 47832 Tamar, this is a new addition to the layout that I purchased in February. I've weathered it quite lightly, typical of the passenger condition that it was in during 1989. 47322, this model has been stripped back, my bad weathering removed, redone the weathering and also renumbered the loco at the same time. I've portrayed this in a dirtier condition and made an effort to represent the clean cabs which was often seen on freight locomotives in the period. 47535 University of Leicester, perhaps the oldest and worst weathering attempt on the layout. All the weathering stripped off, redone to a lighter, more realistic standard, and I've also made an effort to add the white quartering marks to the wheels as it's a bit of novel detail that you sometimes see in videos and old photographs. So there you go, I'm quite pleased with the progress. There are still more locomotives that require attention, but a lot of them now I'm much happier with, and I've learnt a few tips and tricks along this process as well. It's all about learning and improving your skills. So let's take a look at some real locomotives and study the weathering. So here's a Class 37. Note the large build-up of dirt and grime on the bogies and the fuel tanks. Notice how the dirt has washed down from the roof. Paintwork still has a sheen as the loco catches the sun. It is not filthy. Class 47, you can see the dirt that's streaked down the side of the body as it's been washed off of the roof when it's rained. And you can also see that the crew, or the maintenance staff, have cleaned the cabs at both ends, but they've not had time to clean the rest of it. Driver not wanting to waste any time in this Class 37 can't have been out of the paint shop very long. One of the first Class 91s on test. Look at the Mark III coaches, dirt on the bottom with the bogies and some dirt on the roof, but the body sides very clean. Poor Class 31 really trying to lug this load of concrete. Dirt washed in the details and especially on the front of the cab, a lot of effects, but not covered in sprayed filth. Rail freight liveried Class 47. Staff have made an effort to make sure the cab remains clean and visible. Another 47 wearing the old British Rail blue. Observe how clean it is. The cabs are clean, the body is clean, there is a sheen in the paintwork, dirt is concentrated below the body and on the roof. So if you're going to take anything away from those examples, then hopefully it's the word clean. I certainly said it enough times. Locos were cleaned. What I'm saying is when you weather them, you need to try and get them to look like the crew actually cares. If you just plaster them, as I've done in the past, with the airbrush and sleeper grime, the whole thing ends up matte, there's no shine to it at all, everything looks absolutely filthy, it looks like no one cared about it from the day it rolled out of the paint shop. So that's quite enough rambling, let's get started and start stripping off the previous weathering attempts. So I find myself in the slightly unfortunate situation where I have a load of weathered stuff that's overdone, in my opinion, and I want to redo it. The challenge is getting that weathering off without ruining the paintwork on 20 odd locos. Over the course of various experiments, I have discovered this high strength cleaner called LA's Totally Awesome is actually very good at removing the rail match enamels that I had applied to the surface of the model. Used carefully, you can get the model back to its original factory finish and then reapproach the weathering attempt. Using this stuff comes with risks. In a few cases, I have damaged the paintwork, numbers have come off, details have come off, and I have had to repaint in a couple of cases. So here we have the jar. As you can see, the colour's not great, as this has done quite a lot of work, but it keeps on going. We shall place the 47 straight in, and I will leave it in there for about an hour. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes. See how all the paint looks like it's coming off? Well, that's just the varnish and the weathering that I've put on. The paintwork underneath is okay. Well, I'll be completely honest, I'm amazed at that. That's worked really, really well. It does not always work like that, trust me. I don't know why this one came out so good, but there you go. Every single bit of detail present and correct. The original factory sheen back on the model, and we're back to the original, vibrance of the colours. Now I can weather this to a better standard. Just for balance, it's not always plain sailing like that. This is a Bachmann class 37/5, and as you can see, it's lost most of its details. This is fixable, it's not going to be a problem. I'll stick this in the video as well. We'll repaint the rail freight grey, put it in gloss, put the transfers back on, and I will also repaint any other bits and pieces that need doing. Some of the black has come off of the nose ends and the cab windows. We'll sort it out, it's not a problem. But I must say, that's brilliant, so pleased with that. Okay, so I'm going to make a start on sorting out the locomotives. We will jump around a bit from one loco to the other, so I apologise for continuity or if it's difficult to follow in a few places. But I have quite a few locos on the bench at the moment, and I would like to get them all sorted out as soon as I can. Okay, so while we wait for the paint to dry on that class 37, I shall move on to 47535 University of Leicester. As you can see, very pleased with this. All of my rubbish weathering has come off, so now let's do a much better job this time round. So we'll start off with the roof, and something I tend to do now is I'll paint the grills in the various locations around the roof to give that bit of depth. We'll use a black wash for that, and then I'll start adding some streaking effects, wash down dirt over the roof. But what we're not going to do is paint the whole roof like a shade of grey, which is what I did previously. Not going to do that. We're going to go for something a bit like this. This is a little bit heavier because parcels locomotives weren't really looked after quite so much. But you can see the colours here in the roof are still picked out. You can still see that blue coming through, and there's that sort of washed dirt effect. And then obviously we have a cloud of dirt around the exhaust, but the colours are still there. It's a more convincing effort than just spraying that with an airbrush. I'll be using some of the Humbrol washes. In this case, we're going to be using the black wash, but I also have other colours available as well. Okay, so we're still working on it. Basically what I've been doing is working the wash around all of the details, and then any bits of it that I'm not happy with or want to tone down, take one of these, a little bit of paint thinner, and just wipe it down. And you have the bonus then of creating that streaked rain-washed effect that you often saw on any piece of large equipment like this that would sit outside, and you keep all of that ingrained filth in the details, in the shut lines, on the rivets, on the separate panels, the grills, all that sort of stuff. So the next thing to do is to focus around the detail on the cab doors. We need to get some dirt in with those handrails, the door handle here, the steps, and the shuts either side of the door. And the same applies to the sort of engine compartment access door that goes here. This needs some black wash around the shut. It will highlight the detail. We can also add a few streaking effects down there as well. And the same goes for the personnel access ladder here to the roof. Okay, the weathering is almost completed. As you can see, I've gone for a much more subtle effect this time round. So the next thing to do is to get the airbrush out. We're going to do some very subtle airbrushing in a few select places. The main reason for doing it is just to add the dirt from the exhaust, but we're going to be very careful and really only apply a very small amount of paint. Okay, so I used the black wash again, the Humbrol black wash, poured a little bit of that into the airbrush and just sprayed it as is. As you can see, we have the dirt from the exhaust. I've done a little bit of blending around the cooler group at this end. This is where the locomotive's radiators are, and you've got two large fans, so that area does get quite dirty, and we've just got a little bit of gentle blending you saw me striping in a crossways style, so that we don't get that sort of longitudinal sprayed finish. Very gentle with that. One pass along the bottom of the body side, all the way around, including the nose, and that's it. Okay, so I've taken the bogies apart so that I can do a bit of painting on the wheels, and this is just a little bit of detail that I picked up on over trawling through endless videos over the years. Occasionally the bit of detail I'm about to paint on does crop up. I've already done this to this particular 47 over here. I don't know how easily you can see, but you can see the marks on the wheels just there, the white marks. I'll only be doing this to a very select few items of rolling stock, as it wasn't a massively common sight, but it is a nice bit of detail. Okay, well there it is, pretty much finished. Much happier with that effort. Quite a bit more professional. There you can see the white stripes on the wheels. It's just a sad bit of detail, but it does certainly make it look interesting when it runs past. We've kept the colour in the roof, but we've also highlighted all of the details and added a nice layer of grime, but it certainly isn't that dark grey sprayed finish that we started out with. And then down the sides of the body, while weathering is present, it is very subtle. I was tempted to do a coat of matte varnish, but to be fair, I quite like how it looks as is. It's got a slight sheen to it, especially down the sides of the body. Being a sort of passenger loco, it just looks a little bit cleaner than, say, this one over here. So for the moment I'm going to leave it alone. Spurred on by the success of the large logo 47, I'm going to move on to this one. This is in the revised Network Southeast livery with the darker blue, and it's just a little bit too airbrushed for my liking. You can see in a couple of places where the airbrush has sort of really chucked the paint on. It's also got a very heavy matte appearance, which isn't too bad, but it has rather taken most of the luster out of the blue. And there's no real detail going on in the roof, it's just been sprayed with roof dirt. Okay, I'll leave that one for about 15-20 minutes and we'll see if we can work the same level of magic as we did with the previous one. Fingers crossed. You'll note the glazing is still fitted. If you have overspray on the glazing on your models, this particular cleaner that I'm using, the LA's totally awesome, does not harm the plastic in the slightest and does an excellent job of cleaning paint off of clear glazing without doing any damage to it. Here's some glazing out of a Mark II coach, and you can see how it's removed the no smoking signs and any of the painting that was around the window frame, the section at the top where the window slides open. All of that's gone, the plastic is nice and clear. While I wait for that Network Southeast loco to lose its weathering, I shall now focus on these two new arrivals. The 47 will receive a light weathering, and this 37 I'll go for something a little bit heavier, as this was working for the engineers hauling ballast trains. Okay, I have removed the body shells from the 37 and the new 47, and I've taken off the bogie frames. So now I can paint the wheels, the fuel tanks and battery boxes and the buffer beams, give them some weathering. These can be weathered separately, and something that's quite handy is obviously you can see there's oil and grease. These are usually a bit greasy, so paint's not going to stick to them all that well. It's a good idea, take them off, give them a wash in some hot soapy water and then paint them. Okay, so now I'm going to weather the underframes, and you can see I've just put a little bit of liquid mask on the fuel gauges just so that we preserve that nice little bit of detail. Fitters, drivers, anyone who was working on the locomotive would have likely cleaned that with a rag if they wanted to read it, so it's going to be cleaner and visible. So I've masked it up to make sure we preserve that bit of detail. We'll also weather the bogie frames separately as they're easier to handle, and we'll be doing all of this with rail match sleeper grime, and I will come back later and go over some of this with a black wash to give a little bit of variation in some places like the coil springs and perhaps some fuel stains and leaks down the sides of the tanks. Sleeper grime is number 406. Okay, so while we wait for the bogies and the chassis to dry, I'll move on to the two body shells. I'm going to be weathering this particular Class 47 relatively lightly, similar to the large logo one we did earlier in the video. Based on the pictures I've seen, this Class 37 was dirtier. Again, it worked for the engineers, so it's not going to be cleaned as regularly. They wouldn't have taken quite so much pride in it. This was a workhorse for BR's internal engineers. This was seen by passengers paying money, so this would have been cleaned more regularly than this. I'll be using broadly the same techniques that we've already seen, but I'll bring you along for the ride anyway. And as before, we'll be making very good use of the Humbrol black wash, very useful. So we'll be using the wash, small brushes and cotton bud, a little bit of paint thinner, and we'll create all of that dirt sort of entrenched in the edges of all of the details, paint the grills, but we will do our best to try and preserve some of the colour of the roof. Okay, this one is now ready for a very small amount of airbrushing. It's difficult to see on camera, but all of the effects are there. You can see the wash around the head code panel, the high intensity headlamp, and there are a few other bits on there as well. And then down the body side we have a very subtle rain washed effect with detail in the doors and the steps. On the roof, similar deal. Harder to see on this example as it has mostly a black roof, but you can see all of the effects going on in there. So I'll do a small amount of airbrushing to this one and we'll put it back together, and then we'll move on to this one. We'll have a bit more fun with that one, make things a bit dirtier.
just done the same thing to the bogies and the fuel tank. Couple of puffs of the wash in a few places just to give the sleeper grime that bit of variation and add that effect of oil and grease that you often saw. So now I'll go ahead and put the model back together. Before I do that, I will just take a brush with a little bit of paint thinner and just clean the backs of the wheels, making sure that the backs of the wheels and the pickups that are touching them are clean. You saw earlier that when I painted this, I did dust the pickups in. They are visible when the train is running, so just to take that coppery sheen off them just makes things look that little bit nicer when you're looking closely when the model goes past. Okay, there we have it, another one down. Very happy with this one, just the sort of effect I was going for a passenger loco. I've done a couple of extra bits. I removed the liquid mask from the fuel gauge, so that now shows up. I've added the etched nameplates. It is nice that Bachmann supply most of their locomotives with etched nameplates where appropriate. And I've just put some blobs of grease on the buffers and painted the shank of the buffers the correct silver. Okay, so now we'll move on to this Class 37, but before we do that, just quickly point out that I did not forget about this. This has come up very nicely. There's a couple of watermarks on it as I rinsed it under a tap after I'd finished stripping the paint off, but that's just waiting to the side to have a final clean up and going over. You can see there's a few little bits left in the roof vents, but that cleaned up quite nicely. Only damage was the cant rail stripe, which I was expecting. That usually does go away. So I'll mask and repaint that, but you've already seen me work on 2 Class 47s, so let's work on something different. So here we have 37046. This is my 3rd Class 47 model, and this particular one is painted in the quite interesting Civil Engineers Dutch livery. This was used by British Rail's engineers and technicians to travel the country and reballast and surface and maintain and replace all of the infrastructure necessary to keep the trains running. All of the locomotives and rolling stock they used were at some point painted in this sort of colour. Now, while I can't show you the raft of photographs of this locomotive in service due to copyright reasons, I can assure you that it's quite a bit dirtier than the Class 47s we've been working on up until this point. But it's still important to note that it is not absolutely plastered in filth. The dirt is very much concentrated around details and streaking down the body side. It's not plastered in like a spray finish. I shall be using the black wash again, but we'll also use the dark grey as well, so that we can be a little bit heavier with some of the effects in a few places. If you just use the black all the time, then you will really start to plaster the model with a very, very dark colour. So I'll experiment a little bit with the dark grey, and we'll go for that heavier layer of grime. Okay, we're about ready for airbrushing. That took the best part of an hour. A lot of the black wash, some of the grey wash, bit of roof dirt, bit of sleeper grime, using thinners and wiping it off where it needed. Lots of cotton buds, dry brushing, and various techniques to build up the effects. But that's the sort of thing I was hoping to achieve, that sort of dirty in-service look. But the model still has a bit of a sheen in a couple of places, and there are a few places on it that are clean, and it looks like, at least, a couple of months ago, somebody did bother to clean it. I've also made sure to do a similar thing at the front. The split box 37 is a great place for using the wash effect, as there is so much detail. And once again, if you look at pictures of split box 37s, whilst the fronts were yellow and not plastered, there was an awful lot of dirt stuck in all of the details, because even British Rail found it difficult to keep that clean. Similar effects on the roof, making sure the dirt washes over the orange cant rail stripe. So I'll give the model a wipe over. We can now go straight in for some airbrushing. We'll do a little bit more airbrushing than I have done previously, but we will be being careful not to overdo it, get too carried away. But very pleased with how it's looking so far. That sort of effect there is what I like. That's what I'm trying to achieve these days. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is a bit of the Humbrol dark grey wash. I'm going to put that over the roof, just to give the roof a little bit of a fade to it, show that the paint is showing its age, been bleached in the sun, that sort of thing. All of the dark black wash that I've done in all of the detail underneath will effectively pre-shade those areas, and we should still get that detail showing through. Okay, hopefully you can see the roof has lost some of its luster, and it's now got a bit of a grey tinge to it, showing that it's been bleached and damaged in the sun. Now we're going to do the black wash, going to focus on the exhaust ports, and I'll do a bit around where the fan is as well. I'll also do a little bit over the nose at both ends, but only a very slight amount, focusing more towards the bottom. Okay, so now you can see the dirt on the exhaust and the radiator, and a very slight bit along the bottom of the nose on both ends. So that's done most of the roof effects. So finally, we're going to be very gentle. We're going to mix some sleeper grime and just go along the bottom edge there to blend in some of that heavier filth that I've put along the bottom of the loco. That'll just give us that sort of bit of splashed up brake dirt and dust that's accumulated over the last few weeks in service, and that will complete the heavier weathering for this Class 37. Okay, there we go. I shall leave that to dry, and then we'll have a look and see what we've ended up with. But looking good at the moment. Okay, there it is. And while I'm quite happy with that, I think we can make it look better. Here on the other side, I've started to use a technique that I've done before on some of my Mark 1 parcels vehicles, and that is with a bit of thinner to remove some of the overspray from the sleeper grime passes along the bottom and the grey wash that we placed on the roof. And the effect is that you get this beautiful build-up of filth along the bottom of the locomotive, which is commonly seen in quite a few photographs, and we get some of the livery to show back through again, as well as making the washed down dirt look more impressive. Now, I'm still yet to complete this side. There's too many streaks and they're too regularly spaced, but we'll keep cleaning, and we should yield something that just looks even more interesting than, say, that, which has just got a bit of a sprayed finish to it. Okay, there we go. I think I'm going to call it there. I've rubbed off some of the overspray, as you can see. perfected the staining down the sides of the body, and I've made sure that that layer of grime that I've been trying to get is still present along the bottom of the loco. I've taken the edge off the nose ends just slightly, but we've left all of that ingrained dirt in there, and I've cleaned the windows as if the crew has cleaned them with a rag. So there's a few marks and stuff on there, and there is a mark where the wipers were. Okay, there you have it. Placed it back on the chassis, unmasked the fuel gauges, and I also added a little bit of the black wash to the bogies in a few select places. Generally speaking, that's just what I was trying to achieve, and it's pretty close to a number of the pictures of the real 37046. Okay, this is turning into a bit of a mass weathering session, but while I'm in the zone I do like to try and do as many projects with regards to weathering as I can. So I'm going to keep going. We'll fix that revised Network Southeast Class 47 next, and then move on to anything else that I'm not quite happy with. 47832 should now look right at home pulling those Mark IIFs that I weathered in the previous video, so it's nice to have that one sorted out as well, and that will appear more frequently now in future videos, as I hadn't run it all that much before due to it being pristine. Okay, here we go again. That's come out nicely, just need to paint the cant rail stripe. We'll get to weathering that. This is a Bachmann model. I forget the original running number. It was painted in a slightly unique livery. There was a white stripe that ran along the top of the red stripe, which placed it as a particular locomotive in a particular area of the country. I removed it and renumbered it to just a regular Rail Freight 47, as you can see here. However, too dusty, too airbrushed. We're working through them. Once again, here's a good example of what I'm talking about. On the top just there. All from the airbrush, far too much, wouldn't have been like that. And the transfers are not my finest hour either. But as I say, this was done about 5 or 6 years ago and I didn't really know what I was doing. So let's revisit and improve. Just masked this one up and repainted the cant rail stripe. Another 2 or 3 coats to go before it's completed. And then I'll just touch up any bits that perhaps run under the tape, but it's probably going to be okay. I'm just using some Tamiya acrylic for that, which is X6. I've just done this one in some rail match gloss varnish down the sides, so that we can do a much better effort of the transfers. As I said previously, this one was renumbered. I changed this from the somewhat unique locomotive Bachmann had modelled to a regular Rail Freight 47, and that involved removing the double arrows and moving them to a different location, and it also meant redoing the numbers. So all of those came off for obvious reasons when I stripped the weathering off of this one. So we shall renumber it again, get the transfers back on various places, and it's a tiny bit of touch up to do to the cant rail stripe and the black around the windows, which I can do with a brush. And then the weathering that you've already seen to a similar style will go for somewhere between that 37 and the 47, so go for a sort of medium level of weathering on this one. That should get this one looking a lot better. Okay, 47322 is now looking a bit more respectable. I've replaced any transfers that had damage on them, and I've used obviously reference pics of the real thing to make sure that I get the details correct. This is now complete. It just needs the double arrow symbol, which should hopefully be in the post,
And once that's complete, I'll give it a coat of some satin varnish and we'll do some weathering. This one is starting to get on the road for recovery now. It just needs the black touching in around the nose and the cab windows, as you can see. Also need to reinstate the cant rail stripe, but it certainly looks a lot better than it did. I've repainted the yellow, the red stripe and the grey, so basically it's a full repaint. I'm just following the original paint and using that as a guide for masking, but that's looking quite respectable now. There we have the Network Southeast one touched up and re-weathered and ready to go. Done a few different effects on this one, trying to make each loco a little bit different. It is easy to fall into sort of production line mentality and sort of make them look all the same. So this one's got a few more streaks on the body side, but I've done my best to still keep them subtle. And on this one, the underframe has got a lot more of a sort of black, very dark brown colour as opposed to the sleeper grime colour on some of the others. It just makes things look a little bit more different. Every locomotive is unique. Usual deal on the roof. Painted all the vents and used a wash and brushed it down. I'm now much happier with that one. The blue doesn't have that really flat, dull appearance to it and just seems, I don't know, just seems a little bit more blue. And it'll look a bit better with the coaches. Okay, I seem to have lost the plot. I've done another one. Can't seem to stop re-weathering my earlier efforts. This is 47612, it's called Titan. This is probably my most favourite model. It was my first Class 47 and I bought this back in 2011, so it is 9 years old. I've removed all of my slightly overbore weathering. It was just too airbrushed, too overdone, learning from the mistakes. In my defence, I probably weathered this 6 or 7 years ago. Skills have moved on since then, so I've cleaned it right up and just added that important streaking and weathering on the roof and in the details. We've sort of gone for something a little bit heavier, similar to that one. That one I actually haven't reworked. That's been the inspiration for this project. I did that about a year or two ago and was very pleased with the results. And then that's probably the cleanest one, the newest arrival. And transfers have arrived. These are from Railtech, on my doorstep in less than 24 hours. Okay, I'm continuing to make progress and detail this Class 56. It's still not finished, but we're just doing the orange cant rail stripe, which is an absolute pain on the Class 56. As you can see, it runs through the, I suppose they're the hinges or the catches for the grills for the engine room. It is not fun to do. Okay, not bad. Not bad at all. Very important to get that as straight and as nice as you can, because it is an important detail and it will spoil the whole thing if that is wonky or very obviously hand painted. So if you can, it's nice to take the time to do justice to the little details like that. I'll just finish up, go around the leading edge of the cab That's not too bad because there's a raised ridge, so you can use the edge of the brush and do it by hand to get a nice accurate finish, and we can continue. This will be ready with a little bit more touching up to have some gloss varnish, and then I'll put transfers on and we finally get this one back into service.
Okay, well I've just finished the cant rail stripe on that one, so I'm going to do a little bit of touch up. There's a little bit around the black window surrounds that I'm not quite happy with, and one of the masking lines between the yellow and the grey I didn't get particularly straight, so I'll sort that out. This one is now really starting to look like it once did. Again, it needs a little bit of touch up here and there, but this is now certainly on its way back to life after it got so damaged by my original attempts to try and remove the weathering. This 47 is now ready for a coat of satin or matte varnish, depending on what I feel like doing, and it also needs the usual weathering that I've done several times in this video now. So we should have a nice triple of rail freight red stripe liveried locos at the end of this. Okay, tidied it up. It's about as good as it's going to get. It still isn't, 100% perfect, but it's good enough for me. So that's now ready for a coat of gloss varnish and then the usual stuff involving the transfers. Okay, well this one is now ready for some gloss varnish and then we can do the transfers. I've done all of the little details and any touching up and painted the orange cant rail stripe. I can tell you that was a load of fun. But that's now done, and I'm really pleased that I've been able to save this one. It was a right mess at the beginning of the video. Okay, here is yet another corrected 47. This one was weathered somewhat recently, but I fell into the trap of making the dirt streaks far too prominent, especially the small ones along the cant rail. So basically what I've done is gone through and just toned it down. It's still basically the same sort of weathering effect. I've just toned it down. I've added a few more of those subtle dirt washes as opposed to the really prominent black streaks that were on it before. So it looks broadly the same as it did, but we've just freshened it up a little bit. I've also cleaned the overspray off of the area of the chassis down there so that the yellow and the grey shows through a little bit more prominently, and by cleaning that off, the dirt is still present in the details. So there we have 47322 completed. I've gone for a different effect again on the weathering. You'll notice that the cabs are clean and the central body of the loco is dirty. This was a feature that cropped up quite a lot on freight locomotives. Crews just cleaning the ends of the loco and not worrying about the middle. There are plenty of examples of that back in the day. And it just adds a little something to make this one different from the others. So, cool, blimey governor, quite a bit of work, but very pleased with the results. Really nice to be able to reapproach something that you've done a few years ago and do it to a better standard. Took me a long time, but I couldn't be happier. I'm so much happier with each locomotive individually. They all look much better than they did, where previously they were just plastered with airbrush finish. I'm going to continue working on various other locos, but you don't need to see the same thing again. So I will be back as soon as I can with some work on the actual layout. Big thanks to Paul Clark for allowing me to use some of his excellent footage from back in the day. There's a link to his channel in the description, and I'll leave a link at the end of this video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.